Hey folks, so I just finished recording with the quiet legend that is Mr. Kofi Oppong, founder of Urban MBA. We spoke about everything that's happening in the Urban MBA clubhouse over summer. We spoke about Ali and her Cara Eats group that come to Urban MBA Eats together. These people are all 50 plus and they get to eat together and they get to learn how to use AI while surrounded by VR headsets and 3D printers. And I went to see these folks in February this year when I was at the Workspace Design Show. And I have not laughed so hard all year. What a great group of people and what a brilliant atmosphere that is. And the way these people need to learn, this is like, we all talk about AI and everything, and it's one conversation, but the way these people need to learn to use AI is to write letters to the local authority. And it's like really important skills. It gives them more power in their position in society because, as Kofi says in the podcast, the people furthest from the tech get hit the hardest. That group of people in Ali's Caribbean Eats group, they are able to respond much better and with more confidence to the bureaucratic nightmare that comes from local authorities. And sorry if you're a local authority person listening to this, but also the other bit we get into, which is more pertinent to local co-working space owners. Kofi shares how Urban MBA has found its audience and has adjusted its pricing in order to connect with that audience and serve them better, because that Urban MBA co-working space and clubhouse is not in competition with places like the Workers League and the Brew that are also around Old Street roundabout. Urban MBA are aiming to reach young people in the neighbourhood. And the last thing I'm going to really enthuse you to do is, if you go to the LinkedIn co-working group, we post this podcast and Navarro posts his podcast and Fanny posts her podcast and Suzanne posts her podcast there. And so head over there. The link is in the show notes. And as you're listening to this, if you're like me, as you're listening to this, you always find some kind of like, oh my God, I need to look at that, or I'd like to share that, or they should have said this. Go and leave that in the comments in the LinkedIn group. And that LinkedIn group is a closed private group. It's not on the internet, and we're very careful who we let in and all that kind of stuff. So it's a particularly safer place to have an open conversation about aspects of all these podcasts and all these things that come up in the co-working industry. So that's enough from me. Let's get into the show with Kofi. Hi, folks, and welcome to today's Co-working Values podcast. In the studio is Kofi from Urban MBA. Kofi, loads of people know who you are, but what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for?
Okay, I'm known for running a charity called Urban MBA, and most people know us as the sort of forward-thinking charity, and that we're looking at upskilling and reskilling marginalized communities, in particular in this tech world. So our primary goal is education. To the communities that are worstly underserved, people who can't go to university, etc. And we run 6 weeks, 12 weeks, and 1 year enterprise courses, all at different levels, with the level 6 being the most advanced one, which is a bachelor's finish and on the course.
And we're going to link, to the other podcast we did, which was longer, but it was more in depth about the future of work and wealth inequality. And which did really well. I'm wildly grateful for how we just pulled that off. What have you got to say about, because folks, we're going to do like a what's going on this summer at Urban MBA kind of thing. So what is happening? Can you say where you are with the upskilling and explain that? Because when I shout out upskilling, what does that mean? But in the context of who Urban MBA has connected with over the last year and who it's serving in I call it the Urban MBA HQ by Old Street. What's going on?
So right now we're in that crazy midst of AI, as an example, and AI is one of what we call 9 transformative technologies that are going to change where we're going. I mentioned and introduced Claude AI to you all those years back, and the CEO of Claude just came out recently and talked about the fact that nobody really understands what's going to hit us in terms of with AI, because of how aggressive it is. Now, AI has a number of things that are going on in it. One of them is called AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which is when AI can run a whole company by itself. And they're now talking about ASI, which is artificial superintelligence, which is when AI is smarter than any of the greatest people we've ever had on this earth, and will be able to solve a number of things. And so from that perspective, it's very important that the next generations understand what jobs are coming, what they have to do, because we are not fully prepared for that. And that's a lot of what Urban MBA does in our tech hub and our co-working space that we have as well. So it's looking at that one technology, what it could do, and then what jobs are going to be available. But like I said, there's 9 of them, and I've spoken about quantum, lots of other technologies that are coming in. So there's 400 million job losses predicted for the future globally, and what jobs are going to be created after, we don't really know. We do know that things like AI, as an example, if you understand how to use it and data, you have more chance of being employable for the future, and that's what we're focused on.
I was we had our whole little AI quiz, and we'll put a link in the show notes, folks, to the 5-day educational email course about AI, and 50 people have gone through our how to run a co-working space AI quiz thing, and just from, I can't tell you who said what in there, and I never would, but so many people are not who run co-working spaces or are co-working space community managers are not using AI to help them in their day-to-day tasks. And you can save how let me ask you a question before I monologue it, Kofi. Like, if I'm in that kind of role, how much time do you think you could save, or give another example from your own experience of the time saving available by using AI in your day-to-day?
So that depends on how advanced you use it. And in particular, and without going too far-fetched, it is 5 or 10 hours a week you could save depending on how much you use. And the government's just recently done a study with civil servants and said pretty much the same type of thing, that it could save them that amount of time per week. And if you add that up to a year in terms of what you can achieve from that time, it is going to be absolutely awesome. And there are other ways that you can use it in terms of time saving. So you mentioned our summer camp, and this year we've had a summer camp for kids, which is actually today at 11 o'clock. And it's young people up to 15. But last week I showed 2 15-year-old twins who were in the summer camp how to use AI for code vibing. And they were challenged to create games using Claude, and Studio AI was the other space that we put them in. And these 2 kids have come here, and we have a curriculum and a program going on. And after lunch, you can spend time in our tech hub where you just chill and play games if you've done the task in the morning. I couldn't get them off the AI. Once they realized what it could do, they started copying the code, using it on other AI platforms, and they are inventing games, and they've re-signed up to come this week because they have so much fun in understanding how it works. So we're talking about regular work and what it could save you, but what it could do with young people. And when I'm talking about jobs for the future, Denson Hart coined that phrase, code vibing, because AI can now do any code that you want and create lots of things like games. And the kids that are coming in today are going to be able to create Tetris, all sorts of games on this, and it gives them then the interest of looking at coding without having to code, but also gets them using AI. And that's the type of thing it can do all across the board, right from 8 all the way up to somebody who's 60 and needs to connect with the council and write letters. AI makes your life so much more easier.
Oh, can you tell me about that bit? I just want you to talk about the workshop helping those people that you run at Urban MBA, because that is one of the best things I've seen.
So we partnered with a lady called Ali Kakande, and she runs an organization called Cara Eats. Now, I think it's from a charity, even a co-working perspective, it's very difficult, Bernie, to get charities to work together. And that's a whole nother thing. So when I connected with Ali, and it was in January this year, she could see all the stuff that we were doing with AI, and we taught her a lot with AI. So we partnered together to teach her group. Now, Cara Eats has a space where they do Caribbean meals every Friday, at 12 o'clock lunchtime, and they play bingo and other thing. And she's built a huge community of over 50s in the African Caribbean diaspora and in Hackney. So we partnered with her to teach the over 50s how to use AI, because everything has gone digital in this country, and those are the ones that are struggling to connect. So we went from basics in terms of online browsing to how do you use AI. And I helped a lady solve problems with the council by showing her how to write letters in seconds and then how to get it sent off. So all of these things are now becoming important because lots of basic society needs are changing. Like if you're connecting with the council now, it's all gone digital. So those sometimes become isolated because they don't know how to connect. And it was one of the best things that we've done. And we're looking at how we roll that out in a lot more detail in the future.
That was, and I remember when we came for the workspace design show, coming with my niece downstairs while they were having lunch before they went into the workshop, and that is one of my favorite co-working stories. And I'm going to link to Ali's podcast where we talk about all those people round that table eating, and I always remember the laughing. It was just such a good atmosphere. And it's so cool seeing that kind of thing happen in the. Can you explain like the ed tech area they're sitting in? Because there's this group of like over 60 Afro-Caribbean people laughing and eating, and it's just a great atmosphere. And what are they surrounded by downstairs?
So it's really interesting because we have VR machines from Meta. And then when I mentioned AI as ASI, artificial superintelligence, Meta just came out recently and is saying that everybody will have their own ASI in the future. And that's where they're pushing with it. And they believe that'll be here in 3 years. So even introducing them to technologies like that, which we have with VR glasses, etc., sitting there was an eye-opener for them and seeing them use it. We've got Atari old school games which link to our course, because what many people don't know is that Steve Jobs started at Atari, and it leads into our gaming history and how gaming have got to the level where it's got to now. We have 3D printers, which tend to be the thing that everybody's really, really excited about. And when we created the EdTech Hub, I didn't understand the impact that 3D printing will have on people because they're just fascinated with it. On top of that, we've got 3D printed quantum computer replicators because we're teaching quantum computing. So they're surrounded by all this modern tech. And the idea also with this, Bernie, is that when they hear about them, they tell their grandchildren, their kids, etc., what things are coming, which might pique or tweak their interest. And we can potentially get more students from that, which we already have had 5 from the people who have come here and understood what we were talking to them about. Most people always say when I talk to them, it's terrifying, but the fact of the matter is you need to know. If you don't know, those changes that are coming are going to leave us in a very bad situation as we're furthest away from understanding what's going on in that world.
It's like dark and exciting times simultaneously. What is I'm tempted to talk about universal basic income, but we need to stick to the script. What is so that EdTech Centre? That's where we ran the Unreasonable Hospitality workshop at the Workspace Design Show, and there's been award festivals and things down there. But like, what other sort of events have happened in that? I think it's the clubhouse. I know you want to call it the EdTech Centre, which is the correct thing, but it is the Urban MBA clubhouse.
Well, it's what we're known for, so I'll accept if you say it's the clubhouse. I think one of the things coming into this space, Bernie, and you run co-working and talk a lot about how we connect with communities. What I found is that we've come into a space, and what everybody's told us about what we should do in terms of connecting and getting people to use our co-working space isn't really working for us. We're vibrant. We've got those things of what we talk about downstairs, etc., like these technologies. And one of them, as an example, is called CRISPR. And CRISPR is the DNA source code of humanity, because we're making massive advancements in healthcare, etc., by manipulating DNA. CRISPR is solving sickle cell in the Black community. And I remember when I was speaking about this 2 years ago, we now have something up there that is doing that. So sometimes our community do not understand what's going on and how it can solve them. So I'm going about in a roundabout to get back to what I'm talking about, in that we're building now with different communities. One of them is the anime community, as an example, where we did a Comic-Con after party for them to connect with them, which then led on to a 3D printing sip and paint workshop. Now, for those that don't understand, creatives in the UK absolutely despise AI. And even with the anime community, I was warned that they cancel people if you talk about AI, because the creative sector is very afraid of it. But when we did the 3D printing sip and paint, Antonio taught and showed them how to use AI to model the characters that they wanted to print using the 3D printer. And when they found use for it, it wasn't so scary and they weren't so negative, because they realized these are tools that you can use. So there's a big part of education in that. And it's how do we connect to those communities? A lot of the community that were there were young and into all of those things, but they learn things. So we're making a big drive now to really understand what our communities are. And to give you an example, we've slashed all our prices, because we're the traditional co-working person is, and it's no disrespect to anybody, it's white middle class with money, and they go to all the co-working spaces around Old Street, etc. I think what we've got to do, and part of our mission, is to explain co-working. And so let's make it easier for them to use. So we've slashed all the prices that you can get a hot desk for £15, anybody in the local community. So we can bring them in. They've got a place to work. They understand their kids can get some education here and also be introduced to technology. So the co-working people is one of them. The other group that we've connected with a lot has come by default through our AI courses. So what we're finding is that they're coming back time and time again, and the same people, when we put AI courses up, and it's always filled, because they're saying they can't get this information from anywhere else, and we're the ones that do it most practically. To give you an example, we've now been working with Waltham Forest, where we've done it for their creative enterprise zone, etc. But that whole thing around, we've been here for 18 months and we've not really, in my opinion, connected or given our community enough reason to use the space. And that's the drive we're on at this particular time.
I think there's something about like how long it's. I've seen lots of, and I've helped them do this. Co-working spaces open up in a neighbourhood, and there's so many. You said like white middle class. There's so many nice people that are brought, well-intentioned people that are brought buildings in an area that's not white middle class, and it's arrived there because of affordability, and then everyone in the building, and this happened a lot in Hackney, which is actually how you and I met in 2019 because of I can't remember her name, the research that was done around Hackney about how many co-working spaces in Hackney do not represent the demographic of that time in Hackney, and the people in the building don't look like the neighbourhood, and it's a huge. You could just say, gentrification is complicated, but at this stage of the game, I think that's a complete cop out. So how do you connect, Kofi, with the people in the neighbourhood? Because that is the thing that people always want to know. And when Phil and I ran at work hubs in Euston, we found it so hard to connect with people in the local neighbourhood. And the only thing that made it happen was when there was a street party for the MP that was shot, Joe, which was run by the GMB union, who were our neighbours. And then we got to meet everybody in the neighbourhood, and that kind of transformed our connection with those people. But like, how in Wenlock Street do you connect with the people in the local area?
So a great example is Cara Eats, giving you an example of that. They work in Hackney doing a different thing opposite to us. So them finding out about us means they know they've got a space. But the other thing that we need to do, and we'll be doing more of, is having community days where people can just come in, eat food, catch up, and learn about the space. And as you know, we've got quite a few food alumni, and I partnered with Rachel Cooks, who has been a single mum who created her business 2.5 years ago, as you remember. She's now booming with a van and very clear strategy of where she's going. So we want to use more community people like her. We have a podcast coming out of her to then drive more community activities within the space. So that's one example. Another example is that we do running courses, and there was something running here called Hackney Impact, which was other people who had got money to run courses for marginalized communities and social enterprises and charities. Sorry, not marginalized communities, is to develop the business ideas in Hackney, especially through a social lens. Some of those also attended our 1-year course, which everybody always looks at us and thinks that because we're technology, we only deal with young people. But what we're finding is that, and I'm going to get Ronnie to maybe come and do a podcast with you. But Ronnie is a guy that is 57 and was also on the course working with somebody who's 18. And he heard about us through his sister, and he's called the course Life Changing. So a lot of the stuff that we do from that aspect then spreads the message in terms of what we are doing and getting more people. We're also now connecting with all the Hackney CVS voluntary sectors around the area for them to be able to invite local people, etc., in terms of what we do and how we can support them. So I think we have a couple of issues with the older communities, is that we're seen as so technology driven that sometimes it scares people. But on the other hand, once they've heard us talk and realize it's something that they all need to get involved in, they come back time and time again. We've got other community members, like a guy that I worked with at the gym group when I was in Manor House at that time. He's now gone on to develop a product called Trainee Go-Go, which is helping trainers do online courses. And he's been here for a year developing that. He's also told so many other people. So those are the ways that we're doing it. We want a big word of mouth. And one of the things that's underestimated a lot when you're trying to do this community stuff is word of mouth, because they don't trust a lot of the stuff that's on social media. So you can put out as much social media as you want, but that doesn't necessarily connect people who are local to the community. They want to see that you're doing stuff in the community for them, and that's when they trust you and come in. So all our focus over the next 6 months will be that aspect of doing that. Firstly, making the prices accessible. Secondly, doing events in here that brings those communities in. And then thirdly, connecting with other services in Hackney to then drive that message to them in terms of what we offer.
I really agree with that. That's like the word of mouth mechanism of Urban MBA and how people found the courses in the early days. I think that's what gave it that magic that is not available, because people, someone came to me and said, "Oh, Bernie, you got to go and do Urban MBA." I'd go because it's like, like in business, you'd say it's a direct referral. Whereas if I wouldn't, searching stuff online, of course it works, but it's not as strong and trustworthy. And, as that thing, I was thinking I keep getting fed adverts online by a co-working space. And I don't know whether it's just because I know so much about, years of marketing and co-working, but this place was saying like it was the best it's in London, and I'm not going to say what it is, and I don't think they listen to this podcast either, but they were saying like they were the best local co-working space and they were the best this, and the way the picture is taken of the location it is, I know the location, and they've really, they're like total estate agent shot it so you can look out the window and see amazingness, but that is the only desk that has that view in the whole building. And I know how much, because Emily's like amazing at SEO and looks up how much everyone's spending on SEO through her magic platform thing. And I know how much they're spending on SEO. And I'm thinking all that effort and manipulation where you could just have gone out and invited local people in for a cup of tea. I know I'm simplifying it there, but I think that goes a long way with what you said.
And I just to coin your phrase on that, Bernie. Yeah, we talk a lot about all the stuff to do with, as I said, with technology. But these days you have to be authentic. that word authentic, it's becoming a bigger thing. Online is not always authentic. And what people are looking for is that authentic thing that they're trying to do well. So we might talk about branding, and you do branding and marketing, but the authenticity of a place and what it's supposed to do. And so I think also when people come here, they're very surprised at what we've got. That's what I always get anyway. First and foremost, this is a beautiful space. But then they go, but it's still authentic. And that's what I like hearing, that we haven't gone away from the people that we're trying to serve and our mission.
Yep. Is there anything I haven't asked you? Because I've got to go and have lunch now, Kofi, and and I know you've got a summer camp to get to. Is there anything we were going to talk about that we didn't?
No, I think that was mostly it. Apart from the fact that I will say that everybody really needs to consider being an entrepreneur, and I just want to give you a caveat that last week the Labour leader Starmer has said they're going to stop a lot of the big organizations giving 60, 90-day, 120-day payment terms. You can see the government's gearing up towards an entrepreneurial world. And if you didn't understand that, we didn't talk about the UBI earlier on because it will take us on a different tangent. But things like the universal basic income are being looked at, and they're trying to make it so that small organizations can still survive, because it cost the government 11 billion and many failed businesses because of the fact that people are waiting for payment terms. So I will say that everybody needs to have some form of side hustle. And if you want to do your side hustle, please come to Urban MBA. We can support you.
That's beautiful. There's this, and you might think Keir Starmer's on the ball there, but like if he has done that, it must be serious, because he is possibly the most disappointing individual on the face of the planet at the moment, and that. It's easy to make fun of him, but for any of the governments we've had recently to do that very obvious move for micro and small businesses shows that they are how the needle shifted, or whatever you say. And I almost said what politicians say, and we welcome the move by the Prime Minister to cut terms. Anyway, there's I always love talking to you, and come back and do some more. Where can we find Urban MBA online? We'll put a link in the show notes, but say it to all those people that are running, cooking, or climbing as they're listening to this. Okay,
yeah, we're everywhere. Sign up for our newsletter. It will tell you some of the stuff that's going on. We've got an Urban MBA platform on LinkedIn where we sort of talk a lot more about the higher stuff, and we've got quite a community on there. We're on Instagram. I'm not going to call out all the handles. It will probably be linked down there, but we're on Instagram, Twitter, etc. But we'd love to connect with anybody in LinkedIn, and if you have any questions, you can post them up there, and I'll be happy to answer.
And talking to LinkedIn folks, we're going to post this podcast in the LinkedIn co-working group, and also Mark Navarro, who does a podcast with Spacebring, pardon me. Sorry, Helga. And Suzanne, who does her podcast, which is aimed at like very micro co-working, a lot of stuff we talked about in this podcast. That's what her thing is. And then Fanny does a monthly podcast, which is she goes around and interviews people from all over the world. A much longer podcast than this, but it's more in depth. And we all deliberately post our podcasts in that group because it's a great place for you to discover each other's and connect with people in this kind of co-working ecosystem. So link in the show notes to the LinkedIn group. We'll be back in February at the Workspace Design Show at the Business Design Centre, which is just up the road from the Urban MBA EdTech Centre and Clubhouse. And wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle. Say goodbye, Kofi.
Goodbye.